Ledger is a writing podcast and a fan of letting stuff rest in the drawer. I'm your host, Austin Wilson. Welcome to today's show where I am chatting with R.L. Maizes, the author of A Complete Fiction, a novel about two people who maybe have the same book. One person wrote it, the other person maybe stole it. It's an interesting tale and touches on a lot of stuff that we deal with in our modern world when it comes to writing, the internet, ideas. We talk about all of those things. The book is great. I definitely think you should check it out. R.L. Maizes also wrote Other People's Pets, another novel, and then a short story collection called We Love Anderson Cooper. Make sure you go to R.L. Maizes, that's Maizes.com to check out more about she and her work. She stopped by. We talked about A Complete Fiction, how she engages with her own ideas and how the world influences those ideas and hopefully vice versa. And honestly, we have a really candid and revealing conversation about our mental health. I appreciated that talk so much. It meant a lot to me on that day, and even as I was editing it, it meant a lot to me, and I hope it does for some other people out there too. It's very honest, and I really just appreciate her candor and talking about that stuff. It was great. She also talks about, and this is towards the end of the interview, I probably could have asked her a ton of more questions about this, but it took us a bit to get there just because we talked about so much other stuff. Complete Fiction was on submission for 18 months when she herself decided to pull it because it wasn't getting picked up and she felt something wasn't working. And she changed one storyline and that changed everything. And it's just such an interesting peek into publishing and into writing. So gosh, I was so happy to get to talk about that with her. I love this conversation. Thank you to her. Thank you to Abigail Monty from Penguin Random House. And thank you to you for listening. As always, go to austinrwilson.com. Check out my stuff. You can also go to Substack. I think it's substack.com at Austin R. Wilson. You'll find my page there. I've published 2 stories in April, 2 flash fiction pieces that are free to read for everyone, even if you're paying subscriber to Substack. All my posts are not paywalled. Subscribers who pay are supporting the podcast, which does take money to keep doing, so I appreciate that. Check out that. Check out austinrwilson.com, as I said, mosshartbooks.com, and on Instagram. That's where I am there. But yeah, as for now, here is my chat with R.L. Maizes. I'm very excited for you to listen to it. So one of the things I really liked when I was reading your book, A Complete Fiction, I liked that it was about kind of the marketplace of ideas and the ways in which we all are maybe pulling from the same places or literally pulling from the same places. So I'm curious about if you have found ideas to be difficult to come up with or easy to come up with. Are ideas a thing that come to you all the time, or do you struggle to get to them?
I have to say it's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm the kind of person who's constantly writing down ideas and then I don't know which one to work on first, or I'm working on one thing and I can't wait to get to the second, or that's not me. I'm really a person who works on one thing at a time, and I'm not flooded with other ideas. But I will say that it's somewhat reliable that when I'm finished, there is one for me. I
Yeah.
do worry about the fact that we are pulling from the same kind of well. And so sometimes, more often on smaller things. So, for example, a humor piece. I sometimes write humor pieces. So, more often on smaller things, I'll really want to research what have other people done with this? Have they done with it? Have they done the same treatment I'm doing? And then I won't do it
Yeah.
because I do think when it comes to humor, like people come up with the same joke. They
Hmm.
do.
Yeah.
And then I'm not as concerned with novels. And the reason I say that is because I feel pretty confident that each of us, even if we're writing about a similar topic, has our own voice and it's
Hmm.
going to be different. So I know sometimes, you hear you've written a novel or you're writing a novel and someone else comes out with a quote unquote similar novel,
Yeah.
right? And of course, the first thing that happens is your heart sinks,
Sure.
right? You're like, oh no, they took my idea, I
Yeah.
took their idea, or I can't do the same more. But then you realize you absolutely can,
Yep.
because the novel will be about that idea, but it'll be more about what you uniquely have to say about that idea. And if it's not about that, that's problematic. That's more
Right.
problematic than the fact that someone else has written about it.
Right. Well, even like humor, depending on the length of the humor, like if it's a joke, if it's an essay, like depending on how much meat there is, like the ways in which I can tell a joke that's maybe 2 lines and differentiate it from someone else who has the same idea. Like there's just not that many ways to differentiate those two things. But with the novel, there's a lot more there. There's a lot more depth, or at least there should be, or that's the hope, I guess. I don't know. Is it strictly related to length or, like, depth, the ways in which we can alter our ideas to make them different, even if there's a kernel of the thing that connects 2 ideas?
No, I don't think so
No?
because I do think each of us has a unique voice.
Yeah.
And I think even with a shorter piece, an essay, a short story, even Flash for sure. I mean, definitely Flash too. Two people writing a Flash piece about sexual assault. Let's take that, right?
Yeah.
About sexual assault or
Yeah.
about Me Too or about those are going to be completely different pieces if one isn't actively influenced by the other, right? I
Right.
mean, if I haven't actually read that and then decided is something I'm going to write almost in honor of that piece or because I was inspired by that piece. And of course, taking away the issue of plagiarism, right?
Right.
We're going to say no. We're trying not to do that, right?
Right.
Ideally.
That is the
So
goal.
that is the goal. But no, I think there are ways to differentiate even in short pieces.
Yeah.
And then I think, sometimes this is a little different, but sometimes someone will critique a piece of mine and I get, someone critiques a piece and they say something that resonates with you, right? They,
Yeah.
they say this is problematic, and when you hear it, especially after that initial resistance to anything being wrong at all with your writing, right?
Right.
You get over that resistance, and then you have a little bit of a sinking feeling because it's like, oh, how am I going to fix it? But truly, by the next morning, at least for me,
Mhm.
like there are infinite ways to fix something, and so to that same right idea, there are infinite ways to treat an idea, even a similar idea or the same idea, whether it's plagiarism, whether it's social media, corruption, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think there's just infinite ways to express oneself.
I think so too, and even similar ideas. I saw someone jokingly on Substack the other day talk about how, or I think it was a meme where someone was like, "I can't write that story. This other story exists and does something similar." And the joke was, "My dude, there's like 100,000 Superman movies. Like, why stop telling your version of this story just because there are parts of it that are similar to another?" Now, that's very different than the exact same plot, which is a little more sticky, depending on the situation. Like in your novel, it's pretty different than just people with very similar ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious about. So it's funny you were talking about how maybe it was that bothered you, or I'm curious about the ways in which you thought about this before you wrote the book, which is, as listeners know, and from the intro, it's about two people with books that are similar, and one person is accusing the other of stealing the book because he has read it beforehand. I'm curious in the ways in which you thought about your own work and whether the marketplace or readers would reject it, or if a lot of that was in your head before you came to this, because I've read other interviews with you and you talked about the book being a reaction to authors being canceled, and that's definitely an aspect I want to talk about. But I'm really curious about the ways in which you were engaging with originality and your struggle to be original.
Okay, so now I have to think about that for a minute. I mean, I am a very weird person, right? I'm a weird
Well, welcome.
Right, I come from a weird background, like, and I'll
Yeah,
tell you, I was raised Orthodox Jewish,
yeah,
right? So I left that,
hmm
and yet I'm still very culturally Jewish, right? There's still kind of often, not so much in this novel, but definitely in the rest of my work, some Jewish aspects. And I don't talk about this very often, but I'm gonna talk about it now. I've started to talk about it. I have some mental health issues that are very well managed, but just the same, I have them. And so I feel like I am a unique enough person.
yeah,
I'm 63. Like,
yeah,
I just feel like there's enough that's different about me that whatever I write is going to be pretty different than
yeah,
something someone else wrote. I lean on humor. right?
Yeah.
That's going to make it different, right? It's not that the book is only funny. I hope not. That's not my goal
Yeah.
ever. But I lean on humor. Like I feel like that's one of my strengths. I have a few strengths. I feel like they help differentiate me maybe from other writers, and so I lean on them. And so, because of all those things, and any person sitting in this chair talking to you, right, could list those same things. I feel like, right, they'd have
Sure.
their own differentiators.
Yeah.
That if you work hard at your fiction, and it's really coming from you, and you're not actively plagiarizing, right,
Right.
you can write something original.
Yeah.
So honestly, that's not what I was wrestling with when I wrote this book.
Yeah.
I was really wrestling more with some unfairness that I saw happening to people with whom I identify, which was other writers,
Yeah.
right? And so, like it or not, I could feel their pain a
Yeah.
little more when they were accused of something unfairly. And when I say unfairly, and we can talk about this more later when we talk about the book, but like someone accuses your book of doing something wrong in one way
Right.
or another and they haven't read it. Like to me, that's the height of chutzpah. There we
Yeah.
go. Right. Like, like, right. Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to accuse someone of doing something in a book, you got to read it to have the
Yeah.
context.
Bring the facts.
Right. Bring it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, so briefly before we move past it, I also struggle with mental health issues. I take medication for depression and anxiety, and I have for a really long time, and it has absolutely colored my struggles with writing for decades. And I've had a particularly hard previous couple of weeks and months this year, and that's something I always want writers or just people in general. But because I'm a writer and try to talk to writers, I love when people are okay with mentioning that, and we don't have to go any further into it, but that's a big deal to me, so I appreciate you bringing that up.
Right. Well, I actually, I'm going to, if it's okay, I do want to
Oh,
stay on it
please.
for a
Yeah,
minute.
absolutely, please.
So, because I want to echo then the same to you. Like, I am learning that even
Yeah.
this late in my life that, maybe because when I was raised, we didn't talk about these
Yeah.
things. We didn't even go to psychiatrists. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't have the kind of treatments we have now. And I too have been medicated since, my 40s, early 40s. So we're talking 20 years. I was not a writer before I was medicated. I did not have the patience or the ability to focus that being medicated properly has given me. I
Yeah.
also struggled with depression. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled, I have a mood disorder, so I struggled with ups and downs, but deep ups and downs,
Yeah.
too high, too low. And so, I wasn't until I got the right medications. And yet I'd wanted to be a writer my whole life. So I really want to put that out there in the book, the new book, A Complete Fiction, in the acknowledgments. And I've certainly never done this before. I acknowledge the people who made the scientists and the pharmacologists who made my mental health medications. Because I think sometimes people think I can't take medications because it will kill my creativity
Right.
and it will kill me, who I am. And
Right.
I want to say, for me, everyone's going to be different. But
Mhm.
for me, the experience was the opposite. I could be most myself when I was properly medicated.
Gosh, I cannot tell you how much it means to me to hear you say all of that and how big of a deal it is that I am having this conversation with you right now. Um, after the past few weeks that I've had and the few months that I've had where I've struggled and struggled to get to the keyboard, it's a really big deal to find another person who knows what that feels like. Maybe not exactly. It's sort of related to the first question about yours and mine ideas about what the mental health struggle and our personal balances may be. And if I were to write a book about it, it wouldn't be the same as yours, but we do have that piece connecting us that is the same. And I've been medicated since I was probably 20. I just turned 42. And everyone, it's not hard all the time for me, but it is hard sometimes for me to be able to finish things or to get to the page. And I struggle with, the perception of failure, whether it's outwardly or inwardly. And I just talked about it on Substack right before we started because I think it's such an important thing for writers to talk about. And I'm just so sometimes frustrated, but also just curious why people don't talk about some of these things, especially now when it's like Well, if somebody said to me, like, you shouldn't talk about your mental health, to me, that is the perfect way for that person to tell me that I don't need to bother with them. Where I'm just like, you get out of here. Like, why would I not talk about this? Which is my perspective. I lucked into being raised in a way where I was told pretty early on, like I've said it before, my mom told me very early on if I ever had any problem that I should come to her. And she's one of the reasons why I turned out to be okay, because she helped me.
So that's really wonderful, and also I'm sorry. Like, I'm
Thank,
sorry right now is a hard time for you, and
thank you.
that's all. I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
um I hope it passes. A funny thing when, right, when some of these, right, I think for me, for you, probably these are
Yeah.
chronic issues,
Yeah.
but I will say they change
Hmm.
when we get proper medication, and it
They do.
becomes a little less hard. A
Yeah.
little less hard to deal with, and I'm glad that we're both talking about it. I just saw the play Next to Normal, which I don't want to misspeak, but I think it won some big prizes when it was in New York. I'm in Colorado, so it's coming to us sort of years later
Yeah.
with a different cast.
Yeah.
It was still wonderful. We have a wonderful theater here at the Denver Center, and I just saw it, and it actually deals with someone who has severe mental health issues. And I didn't know that going in. Shame on
Yeah.
me. I just didn't research it. I had heard it was good, and I immediately was on edge about how it would be portrayed,
Yeah.
and I have mixed feelings about how it was portrayed,
Yeah.
even though I was choked up. It's a very good play. I was choked
Yeah.
up the whole second half. So it did its job to
I
move
was gonna
me.
say, yeah, that sounds like it succeeded in some way. I It's funny because I think outwardly I present sometimes as having none of these problems. And I think I try to combat that by just being like, no, like on like right now, like I feel fantastic right now. And outwardly presenting to other people as not having a thing where, like, I wish that my brain didn't work in the way that it works, where I am worried about these things or I feel these ways, and I wish I didn't have to deal with those things, but that's not my reality. So I have to confront them. And I think maybe because I mean, the kind of guy who would start a writing podcast and just talk about everything, it's one of those other things that I just put on the pile and be like, all right, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I do want to add, and this is not to glorify
Yeah.
these issues at all, but I want to add that, at least in my case, there's an aspect of a gift in it. I think. I don't think you can separate. This is who we are, right?
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
think, for me at least, I feel I can separate my ability to write and to be creative
Yeah.
completely from this same brain that does some things I don't like, right? That in some ways I wish was maybe a little tamer. But if it
Yeah.
were a little tamer, I wonder if I would be able to write in the way that I do. So I guess we just have to take it all, right? We don't have
Yeah.
no one's giving us a choice. It's a whole it's kind of who we are. And in the same way that sometimes I think about, wow, do I have regrets about something that happened when I was 25 or 35? And, you know, and I think, and not that I don't ever regret things I've done, because I
Sure.
do, but do I wish things had turned out differently? And then you can't have the one without the other. Like, well, then maybe I wouldn't have written this last book, right? Everything would have been different.
My wife and I talk about that so much, where it's like people who are like, I don't have any regrets. And it's like, what do you mean when you say that? Because of course I have regrets, but I do not I try not to labor under this like weight of like, if only I hadn't done this thing, like, but I did. I can't change it. So it's funny that you brought that up, because we talk about it a lot. Because, like, obviously, yeah, I would have had things turn out differently. Or it's funny, I have a friend, his name's Andrew, and this was way back in high school, but it always stuck out to me because we were like, sort of sad high school guys. We were single at the time. We were hanging out one night, and he was like, what do you think we would be like if we were hot dudes, Austin? He's like, what would we be like if we were hot? And I was like, dude, there's no way to know. Like, we would be completely different people than we are now. Like two single nerds watching Conan O'Brien. Like, we would be different dudes. And the idea that we have to spend our energy thinking about that instead of just being these people. It really stuck with me, kind of because it was funny, but also I've thought about it a lot since then because I'm like, there's no way for me to know, so I need to just be this.
Right, and it is funny,
Yeah.
right? It's like, we don't know, and,
Right.
you know, I had the good fortune to interview Bonnie Garmus,
Oh, nice.
who wrote Lessons in Chemistry,
Yeah.
and super funny book, wow.
Yeah.
But not just funny, like worldwide success, like
Yeah.
published
Oh,
in
yeah. Massive.
at least 20 languages. Massive success. Her first published novel, so her debut, not her first written novel, but her first published novel. That's the kind of person that maybe I would be jealous of, right?
Yeah.
Because look at that level of success. Who would like if I don't know the details of her life, then I might say, who wouldn't want that for a
Right.
book they wrote?
Right.
I had the good fortune to interview her. It was her second US tour because the first tour, she had not been that massive success yet, or at least when it was planned, she hadn't been.
Right.
So it was kind of your normal debut book tour, right? So think of that, not a huge tour anymore. Publishers don't do that anymore. Not for an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
And so it was not that big. Well, then she had all this, I think, well-earned success because I love that book so much. And they wanted to do a second one to take advantage of it and to help booksellers, who were selling so many of that book. So I had the good fortune to interview her here in Boulder. The audience packed. I mean, 500 people in a church. We couldn't fit her in the Boulder bookstore, right? So they used the church and packed. People sold out. People were turned away, and that was a ticket that included the book that I'm sure people had read already,
Right.
right? But she was on a 14-day, 13-store city, and it was exhausting.
Yeah.
She didn't have time to go to a restaurant. She didn't have time to see a site, right? You think 14 cities, maybe you get to see some sites. Can you imagine that? Like a different city pretty much every day,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Taking the plane, exhausting. And I could tell. I mean, look, we talked about it a little bit, that not on stage, but like we talked a bit backstage. We talked a little bit about she was doing it to support the bookstores. Like that was her goal. They were supporting her and she wanted to support them. And she knew, of course, an appearance would really support them. It was not, let me just put it this way, it was not glamorous.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was not anything you or I would want to do
Right.
other than to help bookstore. Like, yes, her motivation was fantastic. And so, yes, maybe for that reason, but not for ourselves, right? Any one of us would rather be, as she probably had the choice to be at that point, like lying on a beach, right?
Yep.
Reading a different book, right? Not talking about her own book again, right? Because these tours, also having done some of them, a little bit of them, you just repeat yourself a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so it's just, again, it's when you don't know it from the outside, like when you look at it from the outside, someone's life, like you were saying, who's good looking, right? And you're good looking. I don't mean to, because I can look at you. So
Thank you.
I don't mean to say, but like, well, you're like cool or hip or whatever,
Sure.
right? And
Sure.
you're imagining their life. You have all these
Mhm.
fantasies about. It's very easy to fantasize that all their problems would go away,
Right.
right? But as soon as we know something about them from the inside, like how their life really unfolds, and that fact that I don't think it really matters what you look like. Everyone's got their share
Yeah.
of hardship. It just gets distributed out.
Yeah,
And
and once we confront that, I think it just makes it can humanize us. I think people fight against it when they find that common ground sometimes where they're like, I don't want to recognize something in that, which is one of the reasons why your book has so much interesting stuff happening in it, because there's a part of my brain that's like, did this guy steal this book? And is he a piece of shit? And is he representative of a lot of the stuff that I see being wrong with like modern publishing, or, toxic masculinity within the world of publishing, or just the world in general? But then having him feel like a person that I identify with in some cases is unsettling, but also fun. I mean, that's, why I want to read stories that challenge me.
yeah, I'm glad. I mean, my goal always when I write something, especially, I mean, of course, fiction,
Yeah.
is to write round characters.
Mhm.
is to write complex characters. I don't want, for the most part, villains and heroes. I think there's probably one villain in this book. The senator is
Yeah.
probably a villain. I had a little fun with her. That was a
Yeah.
little bit of fun. But for the characters, the protagonists who really matter, right? The two main characters. I want them to have complex stories. I want their friends to have complex stories because we all have complex stories. And so I think it's a lot more fun to read fiction and try to figure out, just like you were saying, like, do I identify with this character?
Yeah.
Do I not identify with them now? And if that happens every other chapter, that makes me even happier.
Yeah. And well, one of the things I like to talk about, I'm lucky to have a writers group that I do every Saturday, and one of the things we've talked about recently is the difference, which I got from The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, the difference between antagonist and villain. And a protagonist can also be an antagonist, and the gradations of those characters and the characteristics that they have, instead of just being like, this is a villain. And senators make it easy sometimes to to have them be villains.
Yeah, and I love that distinction, by the way. Thank you. I've not thought about it in that way. And I really
Eh,
like that, the difference between antagonist and villain.
it really, really hit me. That I love that book, The Writer's Journey. It basically takes Joseph Campbell's like hero's journey and specifically talks about the ways in which it applies to writing certain stories. And it was very, very eye-opening for me for a lot of different story structures and ways in which characters can be used in stories. So I recommend it to everyone. Gosh, you said a lot of stuff that I wanted to get to, and I read an interview with you on Oldster, a Substack, where you mentioned something that you also just mentioned, but now there's a little more context to it because you said your favorite age probably would be 56 because that's when you published your first book, which is a big thing that I want to talk about because that's another thing that writers get hung up on is when they debut, but also that connects with you saying you weren't a writer before you were medicated. So, whatever level of comfort you have talking about that, I would love to maybe get into where writing came from because there's a part of me that wonders if you were a creative person before you were medicated or if it was a thing that you kind of had nurtured even in your subconscious or maybe more in your overtly conscious mind. I don't know. I would love to know about that.
So I wanted to be a writer since I was very young.
Yeah.
I mean, I did, like a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah.
probably, for whatever reason, the stories that I was told inspired me to tell stories. So, for example, I was talking a little bit about being an Orthodox Jew. We were Sabbath observant. So that had two impacts on me becoming a writer. One was that we couldn't turn on the TV, we didn't use electricity, we didn't drive anywhere. And honestly, it would have been horrifically boring if I didn't learn to read.
Books.
We
Yeah.
didn't even turn on and off lights. So we would leave a light on in the bathroom. I would literally get into an empty tub with a book and stay there all Saturday with a book. And
That sounds
thank
amazing, actually.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It was amazing. So books saved me in that way, right? And but also because I wanted to tell stories, I also grew up in a large family. So three sisters, that wasn't like many families of cousins, right? And we all lived in Rockaway when we were young, Queens.
Yeah.
And I, on that same day, on that Sabbath, if I wasn't in that bathtub, I'd go over to to someone's house, right? One of the cousins' houses. And I had a lot of younger cousins and they'd gather around and I'd make up stories. I was a storyteller. So I would tell
Yeah.
them stories. And it was just one of the ways that I kind of related to the world was to tell stories. I don't know why exactly. Certainly, I was one of these people whose mom, definitely my mom told us, read to us, told us stories. Um, but I wanted to be a writer from very young, tried to be a writer. I remember because of the mental health issues, I dropped out of Barnard. So I started college. I was a mess. I really couldn't focus. And it was definitely, I couldn't sit still. I couldn't focus.
Yeah.
I have what's known as bipolar 2. So that's a mood disorder. It's not the bipolar that people sometimes think about where you end up in a hospital. I've never been hospitalized. I have something called hypomania, which is too much energy, but it's not psychosis, thank goodness, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be that would be worse, I think. I
Yeah.
think it would be worse. So I don't have that, so I can't tell you, but So I just couldn't sit still. So I ended up dropping out of college. But before I dropped out of college, I entered a writing contest there and I got an honorable mention in that. And it was a fiction, it was a couple of fiction pieces I had written. And so, of course, again, with that bipolar mind, I was convinced I could just drop out and write the great American novel. I wasn't
Yep.
doing very well anyway, and I was like, "Well, here I am. I'm basically there already," because I got an honorable mention in a college
Yeah.
contest. But I tried to write for a couple of years, and I didn't know any writers. I didn't know how to write at that age, meaning I'm talking 19, 20, 22. I didn't know how you became a writer. I didn't know how to find out how you became a writer. And so then I got discouraged and stopped. I wrote a lot of very terrible things. Sent them to New Yorker. What are you going to do?
Hey, no, that's what you got to do. I
Right.
think I've told this story on here before. I emailed Iowa Writers Workshop and I was like, "Do you have to have a bachelor's to go here?" And and thankfully, some very kind person was like, "Yes, you do need to have a bachelor's before you can come here."
Yeah.
I think I was 18 or 19, and whoever responded to me, thank you
Right.
for
Yeah.
being
It's
very
nice.
kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what you do.
Right. So, but I stopped trying. I mean,
Yeah,
just to get back. I mean, I stopped trying because I couldn't get a toehold. I just
yeah,
didn't know where to begin. And now I'm going to tell a little bit of a sad story.
okay,
So when I was 40, it was on the shelf. It didn't leave my mind entirely, but I became a lawyer. So I really went as far as you can go from fiction writing, if you ask me. Maybe not. Maybe some of those briefs. I don't know.
yeah,
So but I really, it was on the shelf. I wasn't pursuing that dream. It was a dream, but I wasn't doing anything about it. And then when I was 40, my mom was my mom was killed suddenly. And it was one of the hardest things that ever happened to me. It really, I mean, I it took the it just took the wind out of me for a long time.
yeah,
But I also learned from that that you can't say I'll do something tomorrow. That none of us on this earth know how long we have. And so when I recovered from some of the terrible grief in a way that I was able to sit down, I then started again. And at
yeah,
40, I had more resources. I mean, in other words, I knew how to figure things out better than I did at 22 or 23. And we have a great writing school in Denver called Lighthouse Writers Workshop. And I took a bunch of classes there and met other writers and met published writers and started to understand what the journey looked like, which was that you have to work every single day for a long time. And I started writing every day. And I got any help I could. Went to Tin House, went to Sewanee, went to Breadloaf, went wherever people would have me.
yeah,
It was like a miracle to me that I could study with Ursula Hege. I mean, it was like a miracle. Like,
yeah.
oh my God, I loved her book Stones from the River. Like, you can actually study with a real writer. But I did that for years and years. And so if I started in my young 40s, it took till I was 56 to really, I mean, I had short stories published, but to get a book published. I'm glad, and yes, absolutely, to anyone out there, there's no deadline on it. So I have both of those things to say. There's no deadline, but you got to start because you don't know. You don't
Yes.
know how long you have.
My own journey, I'd been writing and submitting probably from right around the time I was 16 and, got rejected for a good decade or more. And when I look at some of the writers whose first novel comes out when they're like 22, 21, for me personally, I would have had no clue how to handle that at that age from myself. It would have been potentially a bad thing that happened to me because I hadn't figured out how to do the things like you were saying as a person in their 40s or in my late 30s. I finally had this like system in mind for how I could, deal with myself, but also do the things that I wanted to do and make things happen. And that in my 20s, that was not
Right.
me.
Yeah.
I couldn't
I
do
hear
it.
you.
But I was happy to see you talking about it and happy to have someone talking about, well, I mean, I'm very, very happy and just very, there's so much gratitude for you talking about the things that you've talked about so far, because I think they're super important for people to realize are part of life.
I'm just going to say, it's funny. I didn't, as I said, I really, this is a little new to me to talk about it. I met
Yeah.
a writer this year, or maybe it was longer now. You know how time stops in your head sometimes. Maybe it's 2 years now. And she was the first writer I'd ever met, maybe the first person I met who I got to know well, who had bipolar disorder. And
Yeah.
she'd written a story about it that was published that was just genius. And I'm not going to say her name here because although I have her permission because I've written about her and what it meant to me to meet her and the fact that she was out about her mental disability. And so it gave me courage to talk about it because it meant so much
Yeah.
for me to meet someone else and be able to talk about it and to share what it meant for us in our writing practice. So that's why I
Yeah.
guess now I'm going to have started to share a little more about it because I said, well, if it was meaningful for me, it'll be meaningful for someone else.
You're 100% right. It was meaningful for me the second
Yeah.
you said it here. So I think it's already working. I was curious about another thing the book does, a complete fiction does, is confront this idea of who has the right to tell certain stories. And it's a big topic, and it's definitely big and bigger now because the internet magnifies a lot of this stuff pretty drastically. But is that a thing that you think everyone has to decide for themselves, or are there like societal, I don't want to say guidelines, but maybe guidelines, societal factors that go into deciding what stories you should tell? It's there's so much weird like semantic kind of gymnastics around like whether you should tell a story, like because technically I can tell any story I want to, but like should I? I guess maybe is I'm so interested in where those two butt up against each
Right. I
other.
mean, I definitely think everyone should decide for themselves. I say that because I guess it's a question a little bit of, well, it's a question of conscience, but it's also a question of proficiency, right? So there's really
Right.
couple of different issues there, right? One is an ethical question, and one is a can I do it well, right? One is a
Right.
do I have the tools, the background, the knowledge to do it well? Those are different issues. Um, I actually think it's okay for people to come out in somewhat different places on this, even people who are
Yeah.
standing in relatively similar places, right? I mean, for me, when I go through that thought process, right, the proficiency is an issue, right? Like, what what can I educate myself about through research, right? And then there's another question too, and that's, am I the best person to tell it? And am I an okay person to tell it? Because best is sort of funny, right?
Right.
Like, what does that even mean if I'm the best person to tell it? Like, are there three best people? Are there seven? Like, I don't, right? So that's
Right.
kind of weird. But so
Right.
again, maybe that just goes back to proficiency, right? Can I tell it in a
Mhm.
way and should is important too. That goes to the ethical question, right? And I say that because, okay, there are some stories, and I don't know if I think I talk about this a little bit in the book, even though it's a novel. I didn't want it to be a lecture, so I'm careful in the book to keep it to fiction. But
Yeah.
there's an issue of in the past, some people haven't been allowed to tell their stories, right? Not only that, and they may be because they're closer to the stories, they may be more proficient. Right. So we may want to hear from
Yes.
them simply because we've been hearing in some ways from the wrong people. Right? People more likely to make mistakes, people more likely to be insensitive. Um, so that's one issue that I think is a big issue that I think anyone has to consider when they think about telling a story that's not their own, right? And that,
Yeah.
obviously that goes to racial issues, but in the book where it's more of a question of a sexual assault victim, it goes to that too, right? Who should get to tell that? And I don't talk about this a lot, but I have some of my own experience. I don't quite have the characters' experiences. There's two characters who that's relevant to in the book. I don't want to give away too much. I don't quite have their experiences, but I definitely have what I would consider to be a Me Too issue
Yeah.
that I've written about a little bit. But could I have written the same book, without having had that? I actually think I could have. I mean, I think I could
Yeah.
have. Are there character stories in life that I stay away from because I don't feel proficient enough? Yes, there are. So it's definitely sometimes I think about, should I write that character when we're all deciding? I'm at the beginning of a novel. I'm trying to figure out who to people it with, right? And on the one hand, I want my book to look like society. So I don't want it to look, I'm white. I don't want it to look all white. I'm Jewish. I don't want it to look all
Right.
Jewish, right? I want it to look a
Right.
little more like kind of the diversity that I hope we have, right, in our world. And at the same time, I need to be a little concerned about the further away a character gets from me, how wrong, how much am I going to screw that up, right? And how much can research help me
Yeah.
with that, and in what ways can't it help me that I just simply can a sensitivity reader help me enough? So it's a little challenging, right? Because we want our books to look diverse, and at the
Yeah.
same time, we're as a white oh me I as a white writer am a little challenged to write a character perhaps who's a little far from me. So those are just complexities, right, that a person should wrestle with. Anyone. So I would definitely say everyone should wrestle with. If you're going to write characters who don't look like you, who don't come from the place you come from, you have to ask yourself, can I write them well with research? Can I write them well with research plus a sensitivity reader?
I think that question, can I do this well? In my opinion, if someone starts and they ask themselves that, they're already at least leaning in the right direction. Because if you're worried if you can do it well, because we want that diversity, or at least you and I do. Whether other people do, it's up to them. But those are the things that I want to, and because I want to create real life, like I want it to be as accurate to real life as I can, and because of that, I don't want the characters to be stereotypes or like wooden cutout people who are just represented by one trait. Like, and if I'm going to confront myself with that hard question, can I tell this story well? Not just can I tell the story. That, like, for me at least, there have been some stories where I'm like, that is an interesting story, but I know I can't tell that story well because it's going to deal with some things that I don't have an experience with, or potentially the research that I would need to do is going to exceed the energy to even write the story. So, and I think maybe some people get afraid of that, of being like, I'm not going to be the person to tell that story. So I just should, like, it's not a big deal to me that I'm not going to tell it. But
Right. I mean, the other side of that coin that is also kind of dealt with in the book is, and that's why I guess I said that, like, I have my own Me Too issue, and that's probably not probably, it's definitely why I wanted to include it in the book. Like, because I have my own Me Too issue, I wanted very much to explore it through fiction. I wanted to see where that would go for me on a psychological level, right? I wanted to air some of my grievances, so to speak.
yeah,
But there are characters in the book, right, who don't look like me, and I still wrote about them, and I hope I wrote about them well.
yeah,
And so I think that's the other side of the coin, is that I can't only write about characters who look like me. Because that's all I want to say. Like, that's just sort of obvious, and I don't think anyone. That's
yeah,
just the opposite. I don't think anyone is saying that you can't. I think the question is, maybe there are people who don't look like me that I can write about well, but maybe they're, or at least well enough to not cause harm,
yes,
right? Because obviously I don't want to be limited to 63-year-old white Jewish women, right? Because those would be
right.
very, at some point, boring books. Maybe almost funny if
Eventually,
at some point.
5 books in,
Right,
maybe you have
right.
a lot there.
There's something there. There's something there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so then that's, I think the question is, and I don't think it's an easy answer. I think it's good to wrestle
Yeah,
with it.
I absolutely think, yeah, it's not an easy answer, and my one of my best friends and I talk about this a lot, especially with, like, canceled creators and canceled writers, and there's a book called Monsters by Claire, I forget her name, but it's wrestling with what do we do with the art of horrific, 99% of the time, men, and it's wrestling with that question of how do you go forward when someone like Neil Gaiman is accused of all of these things, and or Roman Polanski or whoever. And my best friend and I talk about it a lot because even though the answer we end up always coming around towards is the every individual has to decide for themselves. There, it's such a complex issue, and the answer is never easy. Even if we do end up coming to the same answer over and over again, which is it's up to you as an individual what you're going to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why, absolutely. And of course, nobody else knows your own connection to to that community. Maybe you don't look like
Right.
that community, but you have a deep connection for whatever reason to that community. So no,
Right.
just nobody knows your individual circumstance. And honestly, well, it's tricky. I don't. Obviously, if you've done, you can do harm, right? Of course, you can do harm.
Mhm.
Books with stereotypes create harm. It's simply that simple. So if you write a book that has harmful stereotypes, you've done harm. And those
Yeah.
stereotypes can be Jewish stereotypes, as we have in Dickens, right? Or the ones that are closer to us in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And avoiding harm. We talked about this at writers group one week because I said my goal is to avoid harming people, and that I do want to worry about how people react. And someone in the writers group got sort of agitated at that because of the adage that people hear about, like, write with the door closed and edit with it open, and you shouldn't be worried about the audience. And it's like almost every writer on the planet is going to worry about that audience at one point or the other, unless they're writing and putting it in a drawer. And the idea that I would just be trying to avoid harm, like, that shouldn't be controversial, that I don't want to hurt people with my writing. And I think thinking about it, even if it's during the writing, maybe that's going to change what I write. But for me, I just have to accept that and be okay with it.
Yeah, and it's like anything else, it's a balance, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we want to think about what's acceptable out there, right? We do.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, causing harm, right? For sure. And at the same time, we don't want to be so afraid to cause harm
Right.
that we just tie ourselves in knots.
Yeah. It's hard. It's a balance
Yeah.
for sure. And the internet, I mean, the internet is like the best tool that humans have ever created for destroying complexity and
Boy, I love that.
making things. It's just the idea that people want to try to have conversations about some of these things in like 260 characters. It's like we are we have failed by choosing this platform that is just a paragraph as the place where we're going to start talking about this thing that we're not going to
Right.
solve. And the internet is the tool that we've chosen to, and it's upsetting, but it's also one of those things that you just laugh at because you're like, why are you guys, we're arguing about this thing that philosophers
Right.
have been writing books about for eons. It's
Yep.
weird. One of the lines in the book, and I think it is maybe one of the I felt like it was a succinct summation of a theme or a big part of the book. Pandering to the discontented pays well. It stuck out at me, and that stuck with me big time. And I wanted to talk about that. First, were those people, the discontented, on your mind as a potential pitfall of having written this book? Did you ever think I may come up against people who feel that I have wronged them by writing some of these
Oh,
things?
yeah, I did. Absolutely. In fact,
Yeah.
so the book is, about, in part, right, writers being canceled on social media, again, without a full discussion, without people knowing
Yeah.
necessarily what that writer had written, in full, especially. And it's just the topic of cancel culture. And I know some people don't even like that phrase, and I get it, right? And I know why, and I understand why. But I did worry. I worried that I would be canceled. So
Yeah.
definitely, I did worry that people would be upset with this book. I actually worried because I feel like I did a good job of writing about the complexity that people on both sides of those issues would want to cancel me. Like what I had written would not satisfy either side because it's a
Right.
middle. I've tried very hard to write a middle road book. So I worried about that. I didn't change what I was going to do. The book was the book. Sometimes the book just
Yeah.
calls on you to write it. This was what I needed to write. And then for a long time the book didn't get picked up. And so I wondered, wow, I was worried about the audience canceling it. I actually didn't think that the publishers would cancel it. Like they wouldn't want to touch it. And so it would get canceled. And by the way, it could be a million other reasons. You never know why someone
Sure.
doesn't pick up a
Yep.
book. And for most of the time that it was on submission, it was not the best book it could be. So
Yeah.
this book went out too soon. It was rejected for 18 months. I took it back. Made it much better through one, I'll call it a storyline for lack of a better word right now, through one storyline, and then it got picked up in 2 weeks. So I made a mistake with this book in sending it out a little too soon. Although again, that's one of those things, regrets. We're coming full circle because that's one of those
Yep.
regrets that, like, I truly believe that I'm not sure I could have fixed it 18 months early. Like, I really thought it was ready.
Yeah.
My agent thought it was ready. None of the publishers said, "Oh, this is missing." I took it back after 8 months, read a couple of pages, and said, "Oh my gosh, there's this amazing opportunity to satirize social media that you haven't done in the book yet. You've satirized publishing, you've satirized writers, but not social media. This is gonna be so much fun." And it was so much fun.
And that's a massive part of the book. So the social media website was not in the book when you first initially
For
submitted
most
it.
of the time, the social media aspect, Crave was not in the book, and so am I to ask me how happy I am that it was not picked up. I'm so thrilled. It was not the best version of the book that I sent out first, or my agent sent out.
That is so interesting. Oh my gosh, I almost wish that we would have gotten here earlier, and so that we could talk about this. For listeners, that Crave, the app that you make up that exists in the book, is mentioned in the very first sentence of the synopsis on the back of this book, and it wasn't in the book when you originally submitted it. That is so interesting. Why do you like? I'm so interested now in why you think that that wasn't in it originally.
My answer to that is that I did not realize or understand that this book needed to go into a drawer for at least 6 months. Sometimes something you've written needs to go into a drawer for 6 months. It just does. And so I didn't put it in a drawer. Instead, I gave it to my agent. And so that 18 months that tried to submit it when I was working on other things was the drawer because I wasn't looking at it. And it needed that time, as so many projects do, my own, other people's, and sometimes we cheat ourselves out of that time. Now, if I had not had the experience of her submitting it and it getting rejected, would my brain have come up with Crave, this social media app that I had so much fun creating finally, that really made the book better? I don't know. Like, I had to live every moment of that pain. I really did. Every moment of
Yeah,
those painful 18 months, all those rejections, in order for me to be the person who I was when I went back to the book and came up with it. Or would simply putting it in a drawer have for 18 months or 6 months have enabled me to do it? Will I ever know? Absolutely not.
this is it's so interesting. Do you think it was impatience that made you want to
Yep.
send it out, or like it was?
Yes, I'm a very impatient
Yeah,
person. It's terrible for my writing. Will I ever not be an
yeah.
impatient? I hope. I swore. Now I'm writing another novel now, and I swore to myself that I was going to take 10 years to write this book, that I was not going to allow myself to give it to my agent unless for many reasons, not just because it could go into a drawer then a couple of times, but also because if you take 10 years, you can look at every sentence, every word, every verb. Novels are very long. There are 80,000 words. I mean, I've written short stories and I've written novels. My short stories, I looked at every verb in those stories. I looked at every sentence. I really massaged the language over and over again because they were 5,000 words. I
Yeah.
have not been able to do that with a novel. I'm just being honest, to massage every
Yeah.
word and every sentence. I would like to have that experience, to be patient enough to write a novel where not only is it working on a humor level, not only is it working on a dialogue level, but it's working on every verb being as beautiful as the verbs in some of the writers that I admire in their books. You
Yeah.
know, every sentence. But it takes time to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I've written about this on Substack and talked about it on here before too. The world is just pushing us more and more and more to go faster, faster, faster. And that impatience, I think I identify with it very well. Not only because I want my work to be out there so people can interact with it, and not just because I like having someone be like, I liked this piece, but let's be honest, that's a part of it. But also, all of the ways in which our writing gets out there now, whether it is on Substack or any of the other social medias that actually exist and aren't Crave. I mean, even Crave, like that in your book, like it's built on a fast, not even churn, just like this like stream of constant updates. And I think writers have to contend with the world has created. And also within, publishing, all the stuff you hear about, oh, your second book, and oh, the sophomore slump, and all those things, which I think you avoid, by the way.
Thank you.
But it's so interesting that, and to hear that you think that time was the drawer. And I personally also think the drawer is very important. And the people who can write a book a year and it just goes out, like the Grishams, the
Yeah.
Kings, those weirdos are not the people that we should be having set the bar, because it isn't easy to write a book a year and have the book be readable. Like, it needs the drawer.
Right.
That's so
Right.
interesting.
And the other thing I'll say about this book, in a little defense of myself, a little bit, since I've now called myself impatient, and which I am, is simply that this was a little bit of a topical book. I don't.
Yeah.
My first novel wasn't topical. My short stories aren't necessarily topical. So it was a little bit of a different experience for me to write about kind of what was going on in the world and to reflect on it in a novel. But that also meant that I was in a hurry because I was afraid the world would change, right? Too much, and the book wouldn't be relevant anymore. And I will say it's hard to write a novel that is about the world as we know it, because even the new novel that I'm working on now, which isn't about the world, but tangentially it is, the world has changed so much in the couple of years I've been working on it that it's made me think about what does that mean for the draft I have?
But that also connects up with that very first thing we talked about, which was ideas, and the idea of the marketplace of ideas. Because, I mean, I had a publisher turn down a book that I submitted because they already had a book about robots. And I was like, but not this book
Right,
about
right,
robots. And the idea that idea the little box will be checked off in publishers' minds by this other book before yours can get there. I don't even think even if you would consider yourself a particularly impatient thing, I don't think I think that's a thing all writers probably worry about. Like we talked about at the beginning, like, I have to get this idea out there because I'm terrified someone else is going to do it and check that
right,
box.
absolutely. And or the world will change so much that it will not be as relevant as it was while I was writing it, or I will have said something. This did happen to me with an essay, that something happened in the intervening time between the time the essay was accepted and when it was going to run. And something happened
Yeah.
in the world, and I felt like, wow, I can't say exactly what I said now. And they were nice enough to let me like change it in a way, but that's the fear with the novel. And of course, it's much easier to change an essay, and it didn't require a lot of changes, but to reflect on what had happened than it is to change a novel.
Right. Yeah. Well, can you share, or do you want to, anything about the new novel,
Sure.
or is it still too
Sure.
early?
No, no, even though I won't talk too much about plot, but um, so the new novel is about a young man, and set in the 1970s actually, who's the victim of a violent anti-Semitic attack, and who then joins a vigilante group to retaliate. And the results of his retaliation are catastrophic. And that's kind of where the book begins, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
and so it's trying to look at both of these ideas, the idea of anti-Semitism that exists in the world and what it causes, and also vigilantism and violence and reactions of violence and what that causes. So that's the book. But I will say that when I started it, we hadn't had Bondi Beach. We hadn't had a woman killed in Boulder, where I live, through a
Yeah.
firebomb. We hadn't had the synagogue in Michigan, as recently happened. Someone tried to drive in with a fire. So anti-Semitism is getting ramped up a little bit. Isn't that the weirdest phrase to use? You know, historically,
Yeah.
anti-Semitism goes like this, as
Yeah.
we know. And so we're unfortunately kind of climbing, I feel like right now, in the severity and the frequency of what's happening. So that has kind of made me look at the book a little to say, okay, what does that have to change? What what does that mean for the book?
Yeah, and big topic. Yeah, definitely a lot to cover there. I'm interested to see what the book turns into. Are you writing it on contract or
No,
is it
no.
spec?
No one's given me a contract for this. Wouldn't that be nice? Actually,
Yes,
no, because then you're in a hurry. Because the contract
that's
also
right.
has a deadline, so I'm gonna take that
Sure
back.
does.
So it's nice not to have a deadline for it. Whether and where we find a home, I don't know, but it's, it's our mission. We have 2 missions as writers, right? We have a mission to write, simply to write. At least I do. I shouldn't speak for I have a mission to write for myself, just for me
Yeah,
to learn. I think there's a book called, I don't remember the title, but it's a writing book, and it's basically that we write to learn what we think.
yeah,
And I certainly write to learn what I think. I write to examine things that are of concern to me. So it gives me a lot of room, novels especially, to
yeah.
examine things, and that's part of the way I live in a meaningful way. And then the other reason we write is to publish and to share our ideas and our stories. So I would be writing it no matter what, but I do hope it will find a publisher, but I don't actually have to worry about that for a little while because this book, I got my 10 years to write it. So there you go.
There you go. It's all on the page, and you'll be going back day to
Yep.
day. Well, I appreciate you coming by. I really, really appreciate everything that you shared with a ton of gratitude. I think it's very meaningful and helpful to me personally, and I know it'll be helpful to people out there as well. So thank you very much for coming by and
It's my
chatting.
pleasure, and I'm so delighted to be on, and thank you for creating this place for writers. Yet another place, which is so great, in a different format for writers to share ideas.
Thank you to R.L. Maizes for stopping by. Check out her book, A Complete Fiction. You can get it at bookshop.org. There is a Mossart Books store there that you can buy and support the show through purchases of books through Mossart and bookshop.org. I love that place. Yep, check out austinrwilson.com, Substack, Instagram. Make sure you go to rlmazes.com to read more about her work and find all the other stuff that she's done there. Gosh, seriously. So, yeah, there's no deadline on it, guys. Don't forget that. You can publish whenever, just keep going. And don't be afraid to put that story in a drawer or even to just change something and really look at your work with brand new eyes and be critical of it. I think there's a lot of evidence to support doing that, and that story is so great. Seriously, first sentence on the back of the book in that synopsis is the change that she made to a complete fiction. So you never know what's going to do it. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Please subscribe, like, share the show, and if you've listened, reach out to me on Substack. That's where I am most of the time these days. I do have a Blue Sky account, and I don't post to it too much, but it's just my name, Austin R. Wilson. But yeah, let me know on Substack if you've been listening, and if there's anyone you would love for me to talk to. I would love to know. Thanks for stopping by. I'll talk to you later.